guys, welcome to the Treasury Update Podcast Coffee Break Session, the show where we cover foundational Treasury topics and questions in about the same amount of time it takes you to drink your coffee. This is your host, Alexa, and today I'm joined with Craig Jeffery, Managing Partner of Strategic Treasurer. Welcome back, Craig.
Hey, it's good to be back, Alexa.
So today we're going to just jump right in, I guess, and cover what is cash flow. So Craig, what is cash flow?
The best way to think about, what is cash flow, it's the use and availability of liquid assets, which we refer to as cash on a regular basis through the operation of the business or through investment or capital activities.
Okay. That, I guess, kind of leads into the next question, which was, are there different types of cash flows?
Yeah, there are. For those who love accounting, accounting oftentimes refers to them as operating, investment, and financing or capital related activities. So operating would be the core business. Investment and financing would be touching other parts that aren't part of the core business, from, let's say, raising capital outside the business or your investment activity. But not everyone loves accounting. But Treasury oftentimes breaks these things out in much the same way. They may look at cash flows. They may break out operating, for example, quite differently for, collection and disbursement activity, and then investment borrowing and break it out different ways. But however you create your hierarchy of the cash flows, it's fairly similar. And other people have different classifications, but that's some of the ways of doing it. Others break out their cash flows by consistency, reliability of them, and break them out that way. But I guess there's no one single way to do that. Okay,
that's great. Is cash flow different than revenue?
Yes, certainly. So because cash flow has both an in and outbound aspect, it would be different than revenue per se. So oftentimes, whether you're looking at sales or revenue, some of the different classifications there, that would be the inbound side of the operating breakout of cash flow. So it is different. I think the other thing that's different is we have to think about accounting and liquid cash or cash differently. And I know you probably don't want me to go into too much accounting, but the majority of companies, certainly the majority of publicly traded companies, use accrual-based accounting, and that's certainly different than revenue or than income. There are companies that use, cash-based accounting. And while that still has some differences, it's not as great as the differences that you might have in an accrual-based system. I could explain that a little bit, but I know you have a lot of questions, so sure.
Then the next question is, why is cash flow important?
Cash flow is important because liquidity and solvency is crucial. People say cash is king. Cash flow is king as well. So this idea of liquidity and solvency, do I have the cash available to meet my needs as they come due, or the cash available to address all of the liabilities and pay things when they come due is vital. It's not the same as income. You can have a business that is making great income from an accounting perspective, but that doesn't match the cash flow, and there can become a crisis point or an insolvency point based on how income is calculated versus managing cash flow. And thus some of the two competing elements and disciplines of treasury versus accounting, financial analysis, and financial reporting. So that's where some of the differences come into play. But if you don't have liquidity or solvency, you cease doing business, even if you can show income on the books.
Right, that makes sense. And that really kind of sets me up for the next question, which is, what is cash flow analysis?
I think that's probably an awesome question for a much longer discussion, but I'll try to be brief. And by being brief, I'm going to leave off a lot of items here. So for all those here looking for a extremely detailed response, don't get mad. I would define it this way for a short answer as cash flow analysis is the discipline of reviewing the cash flowing in and out of your organization with a mind towards liquidity management. So this is, when I think about that, is if you're doing cash flow analysis and you're a CFA and you're looking at evaluating companies or organizations, you would have to make adjustments for CapEx and depreciation, right? Someone spends a ton of money on equipment, but it's depreciating over 5 years, for example. Well, they had a huge outflow of cash in year one, but you have to add back the depreciation that is reducing income in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. The first year they spent it, they had a huge cash outflow that was way more than what they spent from a expense standpoint, because they could only count, let's say, 1/5 of the expense each year. And so those items of adjusting for how we accrue from an accounting perspective is useful, to make those types of adjustments. So what that means is you prepay for subscriptions, for example. Well, they may roll out those expenses over time, but you have to add that back in for what cash you're going to have when you look at all of your operating flows and projections. Accrual accounting is based upon the concept of the matching principle that if I buy an asset and it has a useful life, I should treat those expenses in a way that links up with the income that I generate from those assets. And that makes perfect sense from an accounting standpoint, but it certainly doesn't flow from a liquidity or cash flow perspective. So there's a difference there. I spent all this money up front, but I'm using that asset to generate income over time. And so it's a way of tracking that, providing stability of flows and supporting generally accepted accounting principles and the principles that are contained in that set of principles. I think the other aspect of applicability for cash flow analysis, Alexa, is you may be growing. You say, I need to do a cash flow analysis because we're growing in a particular country, let's say somewhere in Europe that has very long payment terms. And you can grow very rapidly, but your receivables might be stretched out. Let's just say they're stretched out to 90 days. You're paying, in 30 days, but you're collecting funds in 90 days. When you have disproportionately fast growth, you're going to have, an extension in your receivables grow faster than is reflective of the income that's growing. And so that's going to create a drain on cash until you reach stability, and then it'll come in evenly. But life is not exactly even all the time. And so when these numbers are off a bit or different, it can create an extra drain on cash or use of cash. And we have great income, but now we're having to pour cash into the area to fund it. So cash flow analysis helps us plan for things more closely, more properly, and helps us avoid a number of these surprises.
That was a great shortened version of what that was. Thanks, Craig. So then just to do a quick recap of what is cash flow. It's really the use and the availability of liquid assets, so that might be predominantly cash. There are different types. There's operating, investing, and financing from an accounting perspective. And then why is cash flow important? It's really important because liquidity and solvency are crucial. Cash is king, as we've said, and it really helps to determine if the cash is there to meet a company's needs. And then I really liked how you described the cash flow analysis, which was the discipline of reviewing the cash flowing in and out of the organization. So I think you said that you could have the sales or the revenue there, but if you're not reviewing what or how the cash is actually flowing, then you might not be in as good of a place as you thought you were in. So it's really the planning for things. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to that, Craig.
I like your summary, Alexa. Thank you. Thank you for talking about that today.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today, Craig. And then thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in, and make sure you join us back every first and third Thursday of the month for a new episode. And as always, we love hearing from you. So if you want to send us an email with questions, comments, or any feedback, we love to hear it. And you can do that at podcast@strategictreasure.com. Thanks again, Craig.
Thank you, Alexa.
This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasure LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, Visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.